we have an abundance of apples, and you can only eat so much applesauce and so much apple pie filling before you need a new idea. So I love apple butter, and it makes really cute gifts. So we're gonna make some apple butter today. We're gonna jar it in kind of cute little jars, and these were not shelf stable, so these were given as refrigerated, but we're gonna make shelf stable ones that we're gonna do the full canning process on, and then we'll probably end up giving them out as like Christmas gifts or part of like a Thanksgiving fall gift. But something that will come from our house and go to our loved ones. So we're gonna start out, we've got about 7 pounds of apples. We actually have a little over 7 pounds here because some of these have some spots missing, so I know that we're not gonna get the full use of the apple. We're gonna take what's good and then, you know, throw out what's bad. So we've got probably here about 8 pounds of apples, but you're gonna start with 7 pounds of apples, and then you're gonna peel, core, and dice them up. So we'll show you that process. Example of an apple that has a bad spot, it has a bruise. I think this one probably fell out of the tree and we picked it up off the ground. So you're gonna see here how you can still use the good part of the apple, because we don't like food waste in this house. So you're gonna still use all this part of the apple. We're gonna cut this part out, probably that part, but you're still gonna have over half the apple that you can use to bake. So we have 7 pounds of apples peeled and cored. There are some that have like a little bit of peel, so you don't have to completely take it off. I have mine in the Dutch oven, but you can also do it in the slow cooker. I usually do, but my slow cooker is full of apples for applesauce. So we're gonna do the Dutch oven today. The first couple of ingredients are pretty simple. So we're gonna do a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. This is a tablespoon of ground cinnamon. 1/3 of a teaspoon of nutmeg and a 1/4 teaspoon of cloves. A tablespoon of vanilla extract. And then the real ingredient that makes it good, a cup of white granulated sugar. And then a cup of packed light brown sugar. Nobody ever claimed that this was healthy, but it is the perfect fall treat. And then you're gonna mix this up really good. Once this is mixed up and evenly coated, we're going to put it on the oven. All right, once everything is mixed up, you're gonna put your lid on the Dutch oven. You're gonna set your oven to about a low to medium, you know, kind of judge as the apples start to cook down. It might take anywhere from 6 to 8 hours depending on how large you chop the apples and the type of apple, but we're gonna come back in a couple of hours and we'll be ready to get things canned. So this is when you know it's ready. All of the apples are cooked down kind of to like a similar consistency as the applesauce before we jar it. So a lot of good flavor in there. Obviously the house smells amazing. But at this point we're going to use the immersion blender just because we want it to be really smooth, especially if it's like a butter or a jam, you want it to be smooth. So we're going to use the immersion blender. Get the protector so it doesn't tear the bottom of your pan. But we're gonna blend and blend, and even when you think you've blended enough, you have not. So just keep blending. Okay, we're gonna check it. say that looks pretty good. You might have a little chunks, but it's very few. So I'm gonna say we're good and we're ready to can. So we're ready to get everything into the jars. These have been sterilized, so we'll make another video on that, but you boil the jars to sterilize them. We're gonna put in our funnel and then we're gonna ladle in. So this is really hot, so you wanna be careful. We're gonna start ladling in the apple butter. We chose a smaller jar for this just because apple butter is probably not one of those things that you're going to eat a whole lot of at one time, although I got to be honest, I might take that back because my dad got sent home with some that wasn't like preserved, but was just refrigerator ready. And he said that he had it gone the night that I gave it to him. So maybe he'll get a big jar. But we're going to fill the jar up approximately to that height. We have a tool that we're going to use too to make sure that they're not overfilled because you don't want them to boil over. And we're just going to repeat this process until all the jars are filled. I will show you how we get the air bubbles out though. So I'm going to take this tool, I'm going to use this side of it, and I'm just going to poke in around the jar. Just make sure there's no air pockets. So that one's good. And then I'm going to take this side and I'm going to check and see how far down it goes. So you're going to see these markings right here. We're going to try and go about ½ inch. So that's right where it needs to be. This one is technically a little low, so I might put a little bit more in. This one's maybe just a little low, so I might put a little bit more into both of these. But otherwise it looks good. So once the jars are filled, you're going to take paper towel or a towel cloth with white vinegar, and you're going to wash off or basically just clean off the tops of the jar. The white vinegar helps to make sure that you have a really good seal and that the jars are clean. And then you're going to take your lid. This tool is good for getting the lids out of the pot one at a time after you sterilize. And stick it onto the jars. And then you're going to put your rings on for the actual canning. And you want it to be just finger tight. So you should be able to unscrew it with your fingers. It shouldn't be really difficult. Oh, that one doesn't want to stay on. There we go. And we sterilize these as well. You want to make sure that your lids are sterilized. Your bands are sterilized. And we're going to do this for the rest of the jars, and then into the canner they'll go. So all of the jars are now in the water. This is not what you consider a rolling boil. So we're not going to start the clock right now because the water cooled back down when I removed this and put the jars in. So as soon as it gets to a rolling boil, we're going to start the clock, and then we're going to spend 15 minutes in the water bath once it hits the rolling boil. So can't emphasize that enough because this is definitely not a rolling boil. Okay, so these were at a rolling boil for just over 15 minutes. So we're going to prop them up, and then we're going to put them on a surface that can handle hot because these are going to be piping hot now that they're coming out. We're going to grab them individually, shake them off a little bit, dump any water that's on the top off, and then bring them over to the board. That's the applesauce that's about to go in. This is going to be the apple butter coming over, and you can actually hear some of them are already sealing. You might not have been able to hear that, but heard some pops. So we're going to have to let these sit, and then as the pressure within the jars adjusts for the temperature, your goal is that you're going to get a really good seal. And that can take a couple hours. They don't all happen right away, so you can't get freaked out, but you might be able to hear them popping already. And then we store without the bands. It's a good security measure. If the seal is good enough, you should be able to pick up the jar by just the lid, not the bands. So we're going to keep the bands on for a while, make sure that the seal is good. But then after it looks like they're sealed, we're going to remove the lid, see if the seal is good, and then put them on the shelf. Okay, so these just came out. This is a perfect example of a quick seal. All of these have already sealed. We heard them all popping. This is the only one that hasn't sealed yet. You can hear it. Now, it just came out, so I would be shocked if this one doesn't seal, but as of right now, it hasn't sealed. So we're just going to keep an eye on that one. We're going to put these over on some heat pads, and eventually, probably in a couple hours, we'll be good to take the rings off, be able to make sure that they seal, and then we'll be able to store them. Okay, so we pulled all these out of the canner last night. It's less than 24 hours later, but everything is cooled. Everything looks like it's sealed on the top, so what you're trying to look for is that this seal isn't pushed up. You can't try and push it down. It's a really flat, smooth surface. That's a good sign, but the ultimate sign is when you can take the rings off and pick the jar up by the lid itself without the ring and make sure it's a good seal. So we're gonna do that now. These were all fingertip tight, as we said, so it's not hard to take them off. And then you'll see here, I'm only picking this up by the lid itself. None of my fingers are on the jar. And that's a really good seal. So it looked like it was gonna be a good seal just based off of the lid, but the lift test also says, yep, it's gonna be a good seal. Same thing here, really good seal. Take this one off. Good seal. And we already, tested all of these and took those off, so I was really happy. These were sealing almost immediately after I took them out of the canner. So the pop sound that you hear, oops, as I drop one, the pop sound that you hear, sometimes it can take a couple hours. This took a minute after we took them out of the water bath. So that is the apple butter. This is 2 batches of the recipe that we shared. So if you make 2 batches, this is about how much you'll get. Depending on the household, some people aren't gonna fly through the apple butter, so I like to keep them in the smaller jars. That way you don't feel as much pressure to try and use it all at once. But for my dad, he'll probably get a big jar because he'll go through it. So this is the apple butter all done. This can stay on the shelf usually for about a year, technically longer, but recommendations, or at least by the book, would be about a year. I think this will be gone long before then, but this makes a great gift. I put a ribbon around them, give them out as gifts, or as we had a party and they were kind of like a favor. So do with this what you will, but definitely enjoy.